Hello, good afternoon, Memphis Zoo friends, family, and fans. Thank you for joining us today in our animal live encounter. My name is Bill Haig, and I'm an animal interpreter here at the Memphis Zoo. So you may have noticed that I'm doing my best superhero impression, and I'm wearing a mask and gloves. However, I'm not protecting the city from crime. I'm actually protecting my coworkers and myself from the spread of infectious disease. If you've been following the news recently, you may have heard that non-primate mammals can contract the coronavirus. Thankfully, the Memphis Zoo already follows CDC recommendations. We disinfect what we touch every day and make extra sure that we're social distancing properly. So even though I'm not a real superhero, y'all at home can be superheroes by respectfully social distancing, staying at home, and staying safe. With that being said, Charming is a smooth-sided toad. He's an amphibian, and we believe that he cannot contract the coronavirus. So, for the rest of the show, I'm going to be taking my mask off so you can see and hear me just a little bit better. All right, there we go. So as you can see, he's being pretty active today. Usually toads are what known as ambush predators, which means they spend a lot of their day sitting down somewhere nice, wet, and muddy. So, all right, perfect. Let's get you where you can see. Wet and muddy, where they feel comfortable and they can find their favorite prey items. These are insects. For the most part, smooth-sided toads are insectivores, which means they love worms, bugs, crickets, and other small insects. In addition, these are large-bodied toads, which means, as you can see, they're about palm size, and they can even eat small rodents. So besides having the important job of keeping rodent and insect populations in check, these guys actually live in one of the coolest places on Earth. It's actually my favorite ecosystem. It's the rainforest. That's right, they're from South America. They're all over Brazil, Argentina, and most of northern South America. This is a tropical environment that is humid, wet, and hot. So just like other reptiles like snakes and lizards, frogs and toads are cold-blooded. This means that they enjoy warm environments to help regulate their own temperatures. So a couple little facts just to introduce my friend Charming here. He is 2 to about 3 years old, and he's a retired scientist, which if you want to ask questions about what kind of science he participated in, feel free to ask away. In addition, in his enclosure here in human care at the Memphis Zoo, he likes digging his own tunnels and his own burrows so that he can hide and stay moist. As you can see, he is a fairly large toad, and he has spots around his sides, and for the most part, a smooth back. This is why they're called smooth-sided toads, as colloquially, most toads are bumpy and are covered in warts. Now, smooth-sided toads, one really cool, interesting fact about them is that they still do have warts, but unlike what most people think about warts, they don't have anything to do with hurting people. You're not going to get warts if you touch a toad. The reason why I'm wearing gloves today is to protect our other keepers from infectious diseases and to make sure that no oils or germs on my skin will get absorbed by Charming here. So what warts do provide is a defense mechanism. Inside them, there are chemicals known as bufotoxins. These, when ingested by a predator, can cause heart failure or problems with blood circulation. So it doesn't make him a tasty snack. And most birds of prey that would otherwise really like a tasty toad won't go after this prey item. So he's a survivor, and he's really smart. In fact, most frog species don't live a long time. But my friend Charming here can live up to 10 years in captivity. That's pretty cool. And a lot of people have them as pets and are bred for personal use. Now, before you decide to pick up your own toad as a pet, just make sure that you have the ability to properly care for them. These guys can get pretty big, and they like to eat live insects. So if you aren't comfortable with handling crickets, worms, or even mice, I wouldn't recommend getting him as a pet, even though they're very comfortable with humans, as you can see, and they're a lot of fun to watch hop around. So now I'd like to open up for some questions if anyone has some.
We do. Tons are coming in already. Let's scroll through and see what we have here. I apologize, guys. My internet is freezing. I do see a jokester here. David Kuhn was talk that the toad was beeping.
Well, toads do make sounds. You may notice that, or may hear him croak. This sound is created by sucking air into their lungs and letting it out through their mouth. So one interesting thing is that this is actually a mating call, and they do this primarily during breeding season to attract females.
Now, Kazot age 9 you talked a little bit about environment and what they eat. How does he help science?
Well, so over the past year, Charming is now in retirement. A year ago, he was involved with a breeding program here at the Memphis Zoo, where scientists were investigating how he reproduced and to see how he would breed in different environments, and more importantly, to assist other endangered species of frogs and learn more about their reproductive mechanisms. So, smooth-sided toads are not endangered, but we breed other types of frogs here at the Memphis Zoo called dusky gopher frogs. Their reproductive systems are similar enough that we can look at how Charming would reproduce and apply some of that information to our other more endangered and sensitive frog cousins.
Okay, well, what a great answer. Ileana would like to know, how big can he get?
Well, for males, this is about the biggest that he'll get. He weighs about 8 ounces or so. Females can weigh up to 20 ounces. That's over a full pound. Females will also get much larger than males and can eat up to twice what males can.
So in their little world here, social structure, if they have any, does that mean ladies kind of run it?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, way to be progressive. Smooth-sided toads. Ryan, age 6, wants to know, how long are those tunnels that he's digging to stay nice and cool?
They're pretty short. Now, one interesting thing about smooth-sided toads is that females will dig much larger holes in the ground, which will fill up with water, where they can lay their eggs. Now, one way you can tell, and again, these things will be about twice their body size. These breeding holes where they lay their eggs, all of their eggs, about 10,000 of them at a time, will be connected by a long string. And eventually these eggs will turn into tadpoles and metamorphose or change into metamorphs, which is a tadpole with a larger tail and maybe some back legs to help swim around, and eventually turn into an adult frog or toad.
So we are getting some questions about tongues here.
Mm-hmm.
We got a friend here, Pokey on YouTube, wants to know, how long is their tongue, and is it longer than a frog's? And while we're talking about tongues, we have another friend who also wants to know, is their tongue sticky, and can it catch insects similar to what you see frogs do on media?
Well, very few frogs actually have long tongues that will shoot out of their body to catch flying insects. That's a specific adaptation. Because he spends most of his time on the ground, his tongue, let's see if you can get a better look at him, is no longer or larger than his mouth. In fact, toads do not have a top jaw, and their tongue won't stick out more than about this far.
Okay. So is it sticky though? Like when it...
Oh, yes. It will stick on to insects, and it's just about as moist as the rest of their body.
Let's see, we have Denise Grey here. She just loves listening to these talks and so interesting. She goes, our toad is awesome, and she has a toad of her own in her garden.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, I'm glad that you've tuned in, and I'm glad that you can appreciate the native species we have here in Tennessee. This leads me to one of the points that I like to talk about, which is native species. Amphibians are actually some of the most sensitive species in the entire world. In fact, 70% of amphibians are in decline worldwide, and about 40% of them are threatened, with 20% of them being endangered. This means that it's up to humans to help their populations return to the wild. So a few things you can do, because they're so sensitive to chemicals and different levels of pollutants, that you can be careful where you dump things that have nitrogen, fertilizer, and use biodegradable plastics, and protect your own yard. Many frogs will breed in the spring, just right about now. If you listen to them at night, you can see what frogs you have in your own area.
Okay. Well, Caden, age 4, would like to know, how high can toads jump, particularly our toad?
Well, our toad doesn't jump as high as many others. Some arboreal amphibian species, which means that they live in trees, can jump up to 5 feet in height. However, this guy can't jump more than a foot.
All right. And then someone did ask, can we see him hop? You think that's something he'll do later on for us?
Well, he might. As you can see from his posture, he's a little bit tired. He likes to be low and close to the ground. If he wants to explore this area, he's certainly free to do so. But as I said earlier, he's an ambush predator, and he doesn't like to move unless he absolutely has to. Closer to the end of the presentation, if he feels more comfortable on stage, I'll introduce a few crickets onto the stage and see if he wants to show off his hopping skills.
And Max would like to know, why is he named Charming?
Well, so the 3 brothers we have here at the Memphis Zoo Animal Ambassador Program are Eric, Charming, and Naveen. These are named after Disney princes. And thank you for that question. I really like their names too.
I'm surprised Max didn't ask you who his favorite keeper was. Let's see. Get on through here. We've got Caden. So many friends on here. I think
So what I'm doing right now is I'm adding a little bit of reptile-safe water to the stage. As I mentioned earlier, his favorite places on Earth are wet and moist, high in humidity. And this is important to frog biology because they absorb water and can even breathe through their skin. It's pretty cool. He uses this ability to help maintain moisture, and many scientists believe that some frogs are known as bioindicators because they have such a close connection to the water quality of their environment. They can be used to better understand how water impacts other species just by looking at frogs.
That's really cool. So another fun indicator of how they help with science. We do have a friend here. This is a more question for you from Denise in Central Scotland. What other reptiles do you have the pleasure of working with?
Well, we have a bunch of reptiles here at the Memphis Zoo. Some of these include monitors, which are large-bodied lizards. For example, our savanna monitor, Matt. Some of the other lizards that you've seen in reptiles on this program, which you can watch in our video section on Facebook, include our box turtles, eastern box turtles, which are native to Tennessee. Thank you for tuning in from Scotland, by the way. And some other examples are Iranian desert geckos, and we have a whole herpetological department, which includes amphibians, reptiles, snakes, and larger animals like alligators and Nile crocodiles.
Well, Charming, you definitely have a fan here. Bryce would like to know, is it difficult for him to be the most beautiful toad at the zoo?
Well, he certainly has his work cut out for him. Some of the other toads that we have are bigger and more brightly colored, but he's my favorite. I like where you're thinking.
Let's see. Oh, we got a lot of insect questions. A lot of questions coming about insects. So Libby,
right.
age 5, wants to know what kind of insects does he eat, and of course, quite a few friends want to know what's his favorite treat.
Well, so he eats a variety of insects in the wild. mainly crickets, worms, and sometimes they'll go for insects like water striders. But because of the insect questions, one of his favorite treats is crickets, and I have some of those here for today to see if he'd like to go after them and catch them.
Well, we've got friend Meredith here who says, "Go Bill!" What a cute little toad. So nice shout out for you, friend.
Oh, thank you. Glad that you're tuning in.
Now, Tiffany wants to know about what kind of temperature inside the enclosure would be for him typically.
That's a very good question. Temperature, there we go. You can see his tongue. As you see, it's bright pink. Temperature and humidity are very important factors for the environment, which we keep them in. Temperature ranges from 75 to 85 degrees on most days, with the humidity ranging from 72 to 82 degrees. That's his preferred temperature. But as with many other species, he's very hardy and he can withstand a bit of desiccation in the wild, which means water loss. And he's also heat and cool tolerant, which he can change based on, if he's too cold, he can go out in the sun and bask. And if he's too hot, he can burrow himself down deep into the earth where it's a little bit cooler.
Okay, we are having some more questions pop in here. One I thought's kind of interesting was David wants to know, can he inflate his neck pouch?
Yes, so that's actually in the size. As you can see, he's very comfortable at the moment, so he's not inflated. That's one of his primary defense mechanisms against predators, where he'll increase his size to make him look bigger and bulkier and a little bit scarier to some animals that might think he's tasty.
And Lee wants to know, we found a toad buried in the ground when we were working in the yard. Do toads hibernate?
Yes, some species of toads do hibernate. For this guy, because his native environment is a tropical rainforest, he doesn't have to hibernate. But many native North American species, if they do survive the winter, which many of them don't, will hibernate underground or in warm, moist places and look for breeding around this time of year during early spring, around April, May, and June.
I think it's really cute that he closes his eyes a little bit or version of when he eats. Is there a reason for that? Is that like a him thing? Is that a toad thing?
Yes, there is. So that's actually something that all amphibians do, where they don't have teeth. So it's hard for him to, he doesn't chew his food. So what he does instead is he swallows it whole. And his eyes will actually go back inside of his head and help push the food item down into his throat for digestion in the stomach. So it's using your eyes, the old saying that your eyes can be bigger than your stomach. Well, in this case, his eyes are often more important to digestion than his stomach.
That is insane. I had no idea. We've got Jax age 4 and Harlow age 3. Why do you have gloves on? Is he sticky?
So that's actually a misconception. Frogs and toads aren't necessarily always sticky. Most toad species are a little bit drier in their skin compared to frogs. However, all of them like to be wet and moist if they can. I'm actually using these gloves to protect myself and the frog species from any bacteria I might have on my hands, because they're so sensitive and they can absorb water and oils through their skin. So it's just a precaution. We have amphibian safe water, which we're spraying down the surfaces of this table, and we use that in his enclosure too. So he feels right at home right here in the water.
That's so cool. Duncan H10 wants to know what sound he makes when he's frightened.
So when many toad species are frightened, they may puff up and then release air through their mouth, which may sound like a hiss or a squeak. The croak, which I was talking about earlier, so thank you for tuning in, is more of a mating call. These are usually more common in frog species and will be pretty loud, and you can hear them chirping or croaking at night here in Tennessee.
Well, Bill, you're new to the show, but we have some regulars here, Caitlin and Ian, who tune in almost every day.
Oh, thank you for tuning in.
They like to know if he's colorblind.
Well, actually, I'm not sure. That's a really good question. I know that these guys are nocturnal, so their vision is primarily focused on detecting movement. So if he can see colors, it's probably not super important to his survival, so he wouldn't have a wide spectrum as you or I would.
All right, here's a real popular one I'm sure you get all the time, but Cheryl does want to know, what is the real difference between a frog and a toad?
Well, that's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked. I was waiting for somebody to pop up in the comment section and ask that question. See if he wants to eat any more today before I answer that. Well, the real difference between frogs and toads is actually genetic. There are several phenotypes, physical characteristics, which you can look for to determine the difference between whether an amphibian you see out in the wild is a frog or a toad. This includes their posture. As you can see, toads are sitting upright, and they have usually more bumpy skin or maybe covered with warts, as opposed to frogs, whose resting posture is closer down to the ground and usually have smoother and wetter skin. However, as I said earlier, the best way that you can tell the difference is through their scientific genus, where frogs belong to the Anoran order, and toads belong to the Bufonidae family.
Okay, well, we've got our friend Raylan, age 4, and she just had her birthday. So happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
And Charmin wants to wish you a very happy birthday as well. All right, so David's back with another question. What's the green stuff on your gloves? Is it from the toad?
No, that's actually from its enclosure. So it looks green, but the dirt that he likes to burrow in is brown, and it stained my gloves before I came out here. So it's actually made of coconut husk and moss.
All right, and Brian, age 6, does want to know, how old is he?
So Charming, we don't know his exact age, but he's been with the Memphis Zoo for about 2 years. And when we got him, he was of breeding age. So he is at least 3 years old.
Now, Lucy, age 8, we talked about how high he can jump, but how far can he jump?
Well, not very far all at one time. So these guys, I've been working with them for a bit, and I would estimate they can move about 1.5 feet at max, horizontally. Many other frog species can jump much farther, up to 50 times the own length of their body.
Oh, wow. Margaret has a little gal, Joy, age 10. We talked about what he does, like getting big, but if he did have to defend himself, what's he going to do?
Well, if he was feeling threatened by a predator, his first response would, as I said, be to puff up and maybe hiss. But he wouldn't fight back if he did come in contact with a predator. His most likely response would be to either hide in a burrow that he was hiding in, or under leaf litter, which he really likes to burrow under. And if that didn't work, he would try to hop away.
That makes sense to me. We got Tresha here. How often do they eat, and how long do they sleep?
So in the wild, they're known as opportunistic predators, which means that they'll eat pretty much anything that comes along. I'd say weekly, we can expect them, for a toad his size, to eat about 9 to 12 crickets a week. If you found higher value prey items, such as small rodents, that one small rodent might satiate him or fill him up for a week to 10 days.
We did have some friends on here asking, do they come in a variety of colors, and will he personally ever change colors?
So that's a really good question. Many reptiles will change colors after they shed or before they shed. Amphibians do shed too, but they'll shed in pieces, not one long big shed like a snake. And you can notice slight differences in colors between individuals. For example, some of his brothers have, let's see if we can get a better view, have more spots on the side and a larger contrast between the underside, which is darker, and the lighter top side of the amphibian. However, for the most part, this species won't change colors and doesn't have a large variation in colors between individuals.
Now, this is kind of an interesting one. I'm not totally sure if maybe you can answer this, but we'll try. Back to our friend Pokey on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
How does acid from his stomach not get to his eyes if he swallows with them?
Well, so that's a very good question. They have throats just like us. And their stomach, I don't know a whole lot about the specific chemical properties of it, but they do have a thick stomach lining, and they have a pretty similar digestive system to us. They have an intestine, and a lot of the chemicals that are in his stomach, which help him break down food, will actually separate the proteins and other really valuable bits of crickets and bugs from the exoskeleton, which is something that a lot of animals are unable to do.
All right, and Willow, age 6, wants to know how much does he weigh?
So Charming here is one of the smaller individuals that we have in our Animal Ambassador program, and he only weighs about 6 to 8 ounces.
And guys, we are getting to the end of our segment, so we'll try to get as many questions as we can, but if we didn't get to it, I do apologize. Feel free to send us a message and we'll report back. Alexander wants to know, is there a physical difference between males and females?
Yes. So females are larger bodied, and one of the things that you can do to identify them is to look at their cloaca, which is located on the underside of the frog, right near its tail.
All right, and Catherine would like to know, do toads have webbed feet?
So this species of toad does not. One thing that he does have, which is pretty cool, I'll see if I can get him to show it for you. There we go, sitting upright, is he actually has toenails, just like us, which are located at the end of his, I don't know exactly what they're called, but, fingers or toes.
I was going to say digits or...
Digits, yeah, that's it.
I was going to ask, no one actually put it on here, but I was curious, just me personally as watching. So that's how he digs then? I mean, does he...
Yes, he'll actually, to burrow, he'll back himself up into the earth, and he's not a great digger, and he'll usually use his body weight to move through loose substrate, which is dirt, or leaf litter, which is fallen leaves that have started to decompose.
We are going to end it here with a nice shout out from Daisy, age 4, who loves Memphis Zoo very, very much. And a lot of kids are really just enjoying the show. So way to go, Bill.
All right. Well, thank you, Daisy. Thank you, everyone who's tuned in. And we hope to see you tomorrow with our next animal. Thanks again.